decisive action. The bad news, apparently it was needed. Now, the brigadier, I believe he is a former member of the Defense Force. I find this curious. Exactly what qualifies members of the regiment to have higher administrative positions in various other aspects of national security? First of all, one would think, depending on when you retire, you're close to retirement age, meh. But more importantly, the SSA is an intelligence collection agency, mainly apparently utilizing technological efforts. So it doesn't seem to be a human intelligence gathering agency, mainly, radar, eavesdropping by wiretaps. If we had cameras at strategic locations, I mean, yes, we're supposed to have them throughout certain urban areas, but are they working? We don't know. Most likely, the criminals probably know if the cameras are working or not. And the various authorities aren't really keeping it much of a secret. We, the public, don't necessarily know. As well as, monitoring, I assume, the internet and social media, et cetera, et cetera. The SSA will have all sorts of electronic tools at their disposal, maybe not so much human intelligence tools. Now, an ambassador's experience is a bit more varied than, say, the average Defense Force officer, right? But to what extent are these officers qualified to then lead an intelligence service? Now, usually in foreign militaries, there are intelligence officers, and not just one or two. There'll be a large number of them because in the continental staff system, most commands, so we're talking battalion on up, will have an intelligence officer. Battalion, brigade / regiment, divisional, corps. In the United States case, you will have an intelligence officer for Central Command, Southern Command, European Command, Southeast Asia or Pacific Command, etc., etc. And from this pool of intelligence officers, of course, ships will have intelligence officers, not just Army and Air Force units. So you have multiple services, you have a large pool, then you could take an intelligence officer, cream of the crop, you have options to then go into your civilian intelligence agencies after they retire with their long-standing, high-ranking, high-level experience. Most of our high-ranking officers, I assume, will be limited to command billets, not necessarily intelligence billets. So where is the experience? Believe it or not, our police service probably might be the best agency to, or at least the agency with the most overlap with regards to experience and expertise with any sort of intelligence collection. Of course, there's a debate with regards to the quality of candidates at the top from the police service, which we've had ongoing for quite some time here on Talking Point. But what does the Defense Force do outside of assist the police service? So technically, we have operational commanders, not intelligence officers, and they don't even run operations because they're supposedly, at least when operating on domestic soil in assistance to law enforcement, should be subservient to law enforcement, aka the TTPS, who is running the show, right? Legally, it has to be so. So I don't know if I like the net result of what's going on, but it's decisive action. One could hope it's a net positive. A review is being conducted of all personnel, equipment, and processes within the SSA by the new acting head. I don't know if we should be alarmed by that. Again, the question coming from MP Munilal, what went on here? And then my question is, to what extent do we have a right to know? Maybe we do, because if there's anything untowards, we should know what's going on, right? We should be made aware. But it's an election year coming up. And in this story, there's also been published statements, or I guess you could say speculations from certain other political individuals about, it's 1 year away from elections, and all of a sudden, the leadership of the intelligence, one of the main intelligence agencies of the countries, just got changed by a recommendation from a from the National Security Council, which technically doesn't have authority, but the head of the council is the Prime Minister, so he has authority of cabinet. But again, it's brought the independence now of the SSA into question, although one could argue, has the SSA ever been truly considered independent? Let's we not forget, what happened during the partnerships time. Just say. But unfortunately, we're devoid of information. So many a citizen of TNT will now speculate because we don't know. And of course, the government is going to complain about the speculation, and members of the Ministry of National Security, the SSA, the TTPS, etc., they're going to complain, don't speculate, blah, 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 blah. That's cool, but when you leave people to their own devices, and when you do things that are alarming and leave them to their own devices, what do you expect is going to happen? So folks, speculate away. Just please, please try and not be too crazy. All right, let's move on. And one of the things coming out of these stories that I'd like to highlight is, if you could control a thing, even if you don't own it, you could profit from it. What do I mean by that? Well, and I don't know to what extent this is connected, but this is one of the other big stories coming out of the weekend. The Joint Select Committee of National Security has published a report, and the report, a couple of things have come out of it. The biggest thing is the fact that, hey, we need a new border security agency because customs is focusing too much on revenue collection, and we need somebody to focus more on the law enforcement aspect because, and the report lays out the amount of guns coming in, right? Valuing anywhere from 56 million to 144 million in terms of black market dollars. I believe it might be per year. I'm not entirely sure. The markup, the illegal profit from these illegal firearms is ridiculous, right? With in some cases, looking at profits in the thousands of US dollars for handguns and well, 1,000 or 2,000 US dollars for handguns and a couple of thousand or several thousand for rifles, which of course we know is in the country. We just had at least one murder this week with 5.56 rounds. That's coming from an automatic rifle. Most likely a North American automatic rifle, right? These things sell in the US for hundreds of US dollars and then sell for thousands of US dollars in TNT. Make no mistake. So the Joint Select Committee is pointing to the fact that, hey, our borders are not secure. Let's just be real, right? The mobile scanners, apparently, they are not fit for purpose, and they have a limited number of fixed scanners, and for the most part, they have to check containers by hand, and it's not working. Customs is at half strength with a manpower level that is already said to be outdated or believed to be outdated. So just keep that in mind. Customs is apparently at half strength of an outdated or insufficient manpower level that it's authorized for. It's authorized for about 700, it's at 3 something, and it should be more than 700. That's how bad that is. There's a lot of questions with regards to this. The report also points out to the fact that there are known corrupt officers in various arms of the Protective Service. I believe it's something like 190 officers. The report listed 190 corrupt officials, including 190 police, 52 in the prison service, 7 in immigration, 7 in the regiment, 5 in the Coast Guard. I am surprised that it's only 5 in the Coast Guard, let's be frank. 4 in customs. I am also surprised it's only 4 in customs. Of these, 6 have then been dismissed, with 184 of the reported 190 listed corrupt officials deemed active personnel. That is to say, according to these words, they are still on the clock, they are still on the job, they are still authorized to have access to whatever it is that their corruption allows them to profit on, that they have access from. Again, he who controls a thing can profit from it even if he doesn't own it. Stick with me. So there's a lot of questions from me with regards to customs. The thing with this border security agency is it doesn't necessarily, I don't exactly know what they mean to do about the Coast Guard and maritime patrols. Now, it is funny. Former Commissioner Griffith, former Minister of National Security, blah, blah, blah. He did say that he recommended this 3 years ago after foreign partners were warning. And I do believe, I remember this was a contentious subject. Foreign partners were saying that most of the illegal guns were coming through, or the illegal contraband was coming through legal ports of entry. At least the guns, because the guns could be broken down, they could be smuggled in other heavy machinery, blah, 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 blah. And I remember when this was said, I think it was in Parliament, I found it very hilarious, that the excuse for our poor illegal ports of entries or unsecure maritime borders is the fact that most of it is coming through the legal ports of entry anyway. But regardless, I don't think you can, because guns are still coming through the illegal ports of entry. At the end of the day, we only know the guns that we can track. And then the rest are estimates. It's estimated 1,000 guns come in per year. And the number of guns in the country might be, I believe, within the tens of thousands, right? I could be wrong with that. But to say that we don't have guns coming in through smuggling operations into the illegal ports of entry, meh. So what does this say with regards to the Coast Guard? This whole situation, Dr. Munilal, apparently, he has issues with this. And again, Ruel Munilal has questions, right? He has questions with regards to how this would be implemented, I guess you could say. And to be fair, think about it. We have staffing problems with customs. Instead of trying to solve the staffing problems, we're going to remove a function from customs. Now, apparently customs will remain as the revenue collection agency, and the law enforcement will be given off to this new border enforcement agency. The question is, that doesn't necessarily answer the resource allocation problem here, because we can't necessarily take personnel from customs and we'll just make 2 agencies that are short-staffed and we're not actually going to alleviate the problem. We also have to find people to run this new agency, right? We can't just split the leadership or the executive of customs down the middle and expect, oh, customs, you run with half the personnel. You're already under strength. And this new agency will probably also be under strength, right? The manpower estimates are based upon the total job that customs currently is supposed to be doing, which is both collecting revenue and, enforcing security, finding, smuggling, etc., etc. So, at the end of the day, you could split it in 2 if you want. That's cool. You still have to find the resources to make up the shortfall to now 2 agencies, even though the responsibilities are going to split into 2 separate agencies. They don't have enough as it is right now. So there is that question. There's the Coast Guard question. I do wonder, again, to what extent, why now? Because apparently, and Mr. Munilal brought it up, Edmund Dillon, when he was National Security Minister, also, I believe, brought this to the table, this concept of a new border protection agency. And if that's true, to be fair to him, one has to ask, well, why now? What changed now? Right? Of course, the Border Protection Agency will also be involved with the police, I believe, with assisting in maritime protection with regards to the land part of the equation of our maritime borders. But what about the water? Because, and I'll just like to point out a couple of things. First of all, we have several missing fishermen. One body has come up onto Venezuelan waters. So a Coast Guard is not just maritime patrol, it's also maritime search and rescue. Psh, we don't have that. Then there's the fact, remember what I said? I believe the report only has 5 Coast Guard officers are reported listed as corrupt officials. Don't forget, we besides my questions about a lack of accountability to patrols, there is Coast Guard officers facing disciplinary procedures over claims of sexual exploitation of migrants. That's one of the headlines in today's papers. This is an ongoing story. It should not be completely new news to anybody unless you don't necessarily read the news on a regular enough basis. You feel secure in doing things like this because the system does not hold you into account. You are an agent of the state. you are part of the national security apparatus. And you're not just breaking a minor law, you're breaking a major law because you feel there are enough loopholes for you to break this law. And then, and I'm pointing this out specifically, The Guardian has a highly detailed article yesterday on the oil spill in Tobago and the origin of the vessels involved and potential players involved. And it speaks to, as I believe Mr. San Fernando pointed out, the black market oil and gas industry in the region, which originates from oil and gas products from Venezuela, and it seems as though there's a web of people involved, depending on how true, I don't know how accurate it is, but based on the report, there's a web of people involved, some of whom are in Guyana with informal political connections, let's just say that, who set things in motion to buy a barge which potentially was not necessarily seaworthy to begin with, to transport approximately $2 million US worth in a refined petroleum product from Venezuela to Guyana. And it went through our waters as part of an ongoing or practice of black market energy transportation, where vessels essentially, they go black, they go dark, so that they cannot be easily monitored and tracked because, hey, this product coming out of Venezuela, potentially, at least at the time of heavier sanctions, which might be retaining on Venezuela, this product and its purchase by other countries, neighboring countries, would be illegal, or at least at risk of running afoul of US sanctions. So this has been allowed to go through our waters. Lord only knows how much. This might not be the first time. What do we need a Coast Guard for? I don't know. Maybe to prevent things like this. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, I'll continue with the daily review. Stay tuned to talk about on WSN, your content capital. We'll be right back.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Welcome to Talking About It. Welcome back to Talking About, ladies and gentlemen. Now, on the vein of good news, bad news, some more good news, bad news. Recently, I believe it was yesterday, police found 1.5 tons of marijuana, as well as almost 14 kilograms of cocaine. This was done in Cedros, which ironically is also where the missing fishermen are from, I believe. Now, good news, bad news, right? Why do I say that? Well, $184.5 million worth in drugs was discovered. Most of it marijuana, a substance which technically is currently legal to a certain point, and yet 1.5 tons of it, of illegal marijuana, because at that quantity, I'm pretty sure that's not 4 plants, right? The photo courtesy of the TTPS is on the screen there. Like, look at the scale of this. I'm not sure if I personally have ever seen a find quite of this scale before. It's supposedly a legal substance which we could all grow ourselves, and yet illegal sales, I guess, are still this profitable. What is going on? This is why I said the current policy, this middle of the road thing, I don't think is working, right? Either make it legal completely or make it illegal completely. Maybe not fully legal, but obviously regulated like alcohol. But this middle of the road thing does not seem to be working because the black market is still profiting, criminal enterprises are still profiting, and potentially people are being hit. Now, the report indicated that Venezuelan voices were heard. Whether they're in connection to the drugs or not, probably are, but again, let's not make that assumption. The thing is, it reached the shores. This is on the port of Spain that it got through. It's in Citrus. It came on a boat. It came on a boat illegally through our maritime borders. So good news, bad news. Good news, we found it. Bad news, it slipped past the Coast Guard. By the way, the JSC report basically said not one gun has been interdicted by the Coast Guard. Not a one. Everything that is confiscated is due to the police. So that's the good news. The bad news, it gets past everything else, and then the police has to clean it up. They can't clean up everything, folks. The point of having multi-layers is that each layer will do its part to catch something. We don't just depend on the last layer, the last line of defense, to try and clean up the mess of everybody else. Anyway, let's move on. Running out of time. Now, remember what I said before. He who controls a thing can profit from a thing, whether or not they own it. One of the reasons why I say that is these two stories, technically it's a 2-for-1. Minister Gonzalez, the Public Utilities Minister, he's finding himself in two separate situations where you've had to deal with it. First, there's some communities that were protesting about not getting water for months. This is Kinahan Trace, Chin Chin Road, Kunupia, not months, but potentially years, because due to an alleged water trucking racket at WASA. And the minister has used strong language saying heads will roll. To be fair, he's throwing out new projects. He's more accessible than most government ministers. So, that has to count for something, right? And the question is, will we see any strong action taking place if these allegations are proven to be true? Because, yes, you don't have to own the trucks, nor do you have to own WASA. In some cases, maybe you do own the trucks, if it's private trucks. But you don't have to own the water, but you control it, so you can determine who gets it. Customs controls the legal ports. They could control, who gets through quicker than others, right? Want a little tip in order for my services to be expedited? So, we have this problem here. But then there's a second problem, and this one I find curious and unfortunate. Apparently, the Minister of Public Utilities, Marvin Gonzalez, he has basically come out it's not that he's come out publicly to say this, but he apparently, on his trip to Tobago, I believe it could have been when he was opening the 2 water booster stations last week or the week before, lamented on the amount of potholes or road damage caused by WASA fixing leaks. So, what happens countrywide, nationwide, in the country of Trinidad and Tobago is that WASA will have, as part of its budget, money, resources allocated to fix road damage it causes when fixing leaks. Makes sense, right? The Ministry of Works and Transport and the local government bodies, they don't want to have to spend their money to clean up WASA's mess. Let WASA spend its own money. And the minister is saying, fair enough, we will spend our own money to fix up mess. I saw some of the messes we made in Tobago. We need to clean it up. Now, unfortunately, the Secretary of, let me just double check this here. Secretary of Infrastructure of the THA, Mr. Trevor James, he has come out and basically accused Minister Gonzalez and WASA, etc., of being disrespectful to the THA Executive Council, because he is asking for funding for roadworks, and apparently he feels that he's being bypassed. The problem with his argument, and I understand, because to some extent from his point of view, he is being bypassed. Let's be real. I understand exactly why he feels that way. I would caution him, though, to be a little bit more accurate or careful in his judgment, because if it was Ron Sinanan, Minister of Works and Transport, doing this, then I would understand, because he's doing general road repairs. And in which case one could argue we're right, under the THA Act, that falls on the THA. Really and truly, we should get the resources to deal with that. But what did I say earlier? WASA, to some extent, has a responsibility to clean up its own mess, to fix its own road damage that it causes, to fix leaks. Ron Sinanan is not going to say, no, we're in charge, so we're going to use the money, blah, 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 right? He's going to say, no, WASA, yeah, you use your money. I don't want to deal with this. You fix it. You caused it. And this is where I think Mr. James, again, the experience is showing. WASA is not looking to fix roads and do your job. It's looking to finish its job. But, remember what I said, he who controls a thing could profit off of a thing, whether they own it or not. And it also applies here as well. To what extent now the cynic, and I don't think this is true, but I'm going to have to ask it anyway, because this is what happens in turf wars. Sometimes it's well-meaning and it's in good faith, and sometimes it's in bad faith, because if you have money to do some of my job, it means I have less money with which I could control. Now, sometimes that means corruption. Sometimes it just means I want to be in charge and I want control. And I do believe with regards to the THA, that's more or less what they want here. I don't necessarily think that there's corruption going on. Unfortunately, depending on how you pursue this matter, you open yourself up to your political opponents leveling such accusations against you, especially if you're not careful with your communication. So I would just like to caution Mr. James, be careful what you say on this, because it's not as though the Minister of Public Utilities is breaking a precedent. In fact, he's living up to the standard throughout the country. And again, if you want to secede, then you need to make that argument up front. Don't, you know what I mean, right? I'm not saying that he does want to, I'm just saying it rhetorically. Last story, and this one is a bit of, well, let's go to the last story. I just want to skip to the last story here with regards to the education system. And it has come up in a private motion in the Senate, I believe. No, sorry, in the House, where MP, on Private Members' Day in Parliament, that happened March 1st, MP Anita Haynes-Alleyne, she brought up a motion which was condemning government for failures and mismanagement in the education system. And then Minister Nayan Gaspidoli basically came out and said, hey, no education system is perfect. If we weren't being run properly, then we wouldn't have schools opening at the start of the new school term. The thing is, I think the problem is the truth is somewhere in the middle, right? Now, the real question is not if the truth is in the middle. I believe it is. The real question is where in the middle, because the minister's position and the opposition MP's position, they're quite far apart. And somewhere in the middle is across that entire broad range. I personally think that the education system is in a bad way. To be fair, yes, part of it, ironically, is good management holding the system together in some aspects, and bad management potentially wasting limited resources in other aspects. And then another part of it is the fact that there's just not enough resources, period, despite the fact that it has the highest allocation at 7 billion plus. So what are we to think? I think this is a judgment call. But I think ultimately people need to be a bit more, because this involves your children. But it's not just enough for parents to necessarily look at their own school, right? To some extent, that's where you start. And some parents will have good experiences because the teachers are good, the principal may be good, and some parents will have bad experiences. And that's why I said it's not just enough for you to look at your own school for your own children. You have extended family, you have friends. They all don't go to the same school. Everybody you know does not go to the same school as your child, and all your children do not go to the same school. Unless you have children of only one gender, and somehow or the other, you all just, it's near impossible, right? Maybe your household, yes. My brother and I went to the same secondary school and primary school, but we're two, right? So we as a society need to start looking at this problem holistically, looking at it in its entirety. It's not all the minister's fault, it's not all the ministry's fault. They do something good and they do something bad. Again, so where on the scale does it lie between the MP's allegations and the minister's defense? I'm not entirely sure. I would like to give Minister Dr. Nayak the benefit of the doubt. However, unfortunately, at some point, the results are getting bad. And what are we to do? But again, if it's all budget, which it might just be, but to some extent, is the system just too bloated now? And is there anything we could do about it? And that technically is the minister's responsibility. Folks, let's take a break. When we come back, we welcome the media ambassador here to Talking Point. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after this.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm nothing to do with that.
And I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar
Why? You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No.
Let's go to the last part.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this: screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
We are tackling the hard-hitting topics, some controversial topics, some topics we sweep under the rug. You don't always have to forgive in a relationship for it to move forward.
If it is you are in a situation where you forgive the person, but to the detriment of yourself, what are you really doing?
It is very uncommon for somebody in the younger age group to have dementia.
Atheists don't not believe.
Is that I can't disprove God, but you also can't prove God, so we cannot have a stalemate.
We'll focus on the woman who's being the victim, right, or the man who's being the victim. We exclude the children.
Folks are trying to study the underlying brain mechanism to figure out how does this particular disorder happen in the brain? How is the brain processing this?
Don't worry about AI. Worry about humans working with AI.
Are you willing to learn new skills to stay relevant for the future job market? That's the challenge that people are going to struggle with.
You are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
In the studio now, you don't need to register nothing. You don't need, we can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate
many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a great idea and, you know, I have a great concept, but until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what may have been lost.
We believe we defend criminals and we manipulated the law and we exploiting the system.
A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.
Welcome back to Talking Point, ladies and gentlemen. And in the midst of all the hoopla, there's also something that might have just gone under the radar with regards to the unfortunate crime situation we found in. I did mention this before in the past. In 1 week, there was a stabbing in St. Mary's College and Signal Hill. It's almost like if, you know, the Twin Island Republic wanted to kind of balance itself out, right? It should be shocking, stabbing students, stabbing other students in prestige schools in the country. We've reached that point. Fortunately, I don't believe anybody died in these incidents, but it's just the latest chapter in what I would say is an increasing level of school violence. And here to talk to us, we have, of course, our media ambassador from the TTPS, acting ASP, Ashraf Ali. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Sean. And so you just had to make the all that big elaborate opening, yeah?
All that big elaborate opening, because
because to add to it, it is in fact something on the front burner that we just keep pacifying, and when an incident takes place, there's a big outcry, and then all of a sudden it just goes down again. I mean, it happens on a regular basis.
Because there's now it's not just calls for police officers to be in schools, what I believe it's implied on a full-time basis, but soldiers to be in school on a full-time basis. And I'm just like, that's doubling down bad to worse.
Exactly, and we had to find out a way. The stakeholders within the Ministry of Education and National Security has to find a way to deal with or mitigate the number of issues surrounding school violence. There are several factors that we all have been speaking about on several forums. And only when it rears head again, then the conversation starts. We do not know whether or not the conversation continues after that. Only for most recently, when we had some incidents in the Port of Spain area where they had some shooting in the schools, in and around the area of the schools, the commissioner would have indicated and mandated officers to continue their presence, and police officers to continue paying periodical patrols and their presence in the school. That is only one area that we can facilitate. You understand? Because we will be doing patrols in and around the schools to alleviate some of the concerns that the parents have and the teachers as well as the students. But then we also have the aspect of it, what is the root cause of the violence in schools?
And that's basically what I want to ask you. And I understand that it's a difficult question to answer because it's not as though, you know, up-to-date statistics is something that we have in abundance in TNT. But at the end of the day, we do have to make an attempt to try to figure it out. And there are two culprits that I could think of off the top of my head. I don't know if you have more. Obviously, one of the things we have to ask is to what extent is gang culture, gang recruitment, gang influence. You know, I know it's in the schools, but to what extent now, particularly with the stabbings, because it's not as though we have stabbings every week, but to what extent could it come from that? Or, and I mean, at the end of the day, I keep pointing out to the 13% detection rate, right? It's a signal. Yes, it's a signal that there's a general breakdown in law and order, right? Because you're probably not going to get caught. Now, granted, it's a little bit harder for a school child to commit a crime in school and not get caught. You know, you've narrowed yourself down into a list of obvious suspects. But that general breakdown now, is it encouraging young people to disregard the laws of civil society more and more? Which one is it?
And there's a lot of factors. Now, there's a lot of research, not in Trinidad alone, throughout the world where violence in schools, to the type of violence that I have in schools, we don't have that type of violence here, fortunately for us.
Yes.
Right? But we do not want it to escalate to that situation where we have to treat with it from that perspective. So there's a lot of areas, and there's some of the areas that the research would have indicated is that, you know, they say poor academic performance, prior history of violence. So if the individual, the child had a history of violence in school, or
victim or bullying.
It may be victim or otherwise, because there's other categories. So you may have a history of violence. So the violence that we look at may not have been significant enough to make an impact, but with everything else adding, that child in the home would have been exhibiting certain type of behaviors, right, in a family circle. And then we also have mental health issues. We do not know, and we look at it from a different perspective, but we do know that a child might be under some serious stress, some psychological problems at home, and they are crying out for help. And violence is one of the ways that that has been exhibited as part of the cry out for help. There are a lot of areas that you have to look at. Somebody may have witnessed or been a victim of violence. Now, you just mentioned the issue of the gang culture. Children and students may have, children may have been who living in certain communities on a daily basis. They may have been witnessing violent behaviors, violent acts being committed within the community. They may witness it and believe that that's the norm and that's how you treat with situations. Because, I mean, when you look at the gang culture and the gang violence, gang behavior that we have here in our communities, the way that we treat with conflict is through a level of violence. Yeah. And there's no longer anything about having a conversation. It's all about the terminology that you're using right now. You're disrespecting me, you're disrespecting me. They don't even understand what the context of the word disrespect, but you see it as a disrespect.
And you know, it's funny, because I think I even saw something on YouTube about an ex-inmate in the United States prison system talking about the fact that, hey, back in the day when you disrespected me, I have two fists, you have two fists, we'll fight it out, right? But we're not going to kill each other. We're not going to shank each other in prison or call hits of associates outside or anything like that. We're just going to fight it out, right? And I guess, I don't know if it is to some extent a global thing. Maybe there's too much influence of you know, you see violence in one jurisdiction and it influences the criminals. Hey, we should be like that. You know, look at what they're doing. We should be like that. And with information more readily available, it's easier to kind of, you know, absorb the wrong lessons.
And so true. So you have situations where you see persons emulate individuals who conduct or portray or send messages about violence through several different medias. Right? So you look up to those individuals, and unfortunately, those are some of the role models that these youths are looking at. So students, so is the wrong type of role models that they are looking up to. And when you have the wrong type of role models, it begs the question, what kind of society that we have holistically, when these are the type of role models that you're looking at, the youths are looking at in the context of our society.
Because there was a debate last week, and we had this debate on the show with our arts and culture contributor, myself, and some of our callers. They disagree with us. They came from the opinion of parents. They were pointed the whole Trinidad music debate. But one of my issues with that is, well, to some extent, the murders and the gang violence happened before the music was spawned. The people who make the music are alleged or potentially gang members, but the point is they have to be in the gang phase and go through that whole life of violence. And I guess what you said, it's society has to face some hard questions when this is what's resonating with people.
And sometimes we look at it from the perspective of a gang. We use the word gang violence very openly.
Yes.
But a gang is just a small body of individuals in our community. It's community violence, because it may not be shooting and woundings, but it's just the manner in which the community behaves among themselves, the physical abuse that is taking place in the community, the sexual abuse that is taking place in the community, the verbal abuse of persons in the community. Children are being subjected to the verbal abuse, as well as community members, in families, they have those type of verbal abuse, even financial abuse are also exhibited in the community.
Ironically, I do have to ask, because you're pointing about things like sexual assault, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, financial abuse, domestic matters, right? Not that to say that these are necessarily domestic killings. It's not husbands in some cases killing wives or wives killing husbands, but it could be family members doing reprisal killings. So I have to ask, to some extent, also the perception of our law enforcement deficiencies, right? The actual situation notwithstanding, there's a perception issue, right? Because we use the murder rate as the be-all and end-all, and it doesn't necessarily accurately reflect every major crime, right?
So true.
Like special victims type crimes, because that unit, gender-based violence, etc., is quite active in what they do and has seen quite a lot of success. But perhaps people don't necessarily see the successes or understand where the system is not completely, falling apart, and they think, well, not only do I have to take things in my own hands to seek justice for my family member or myself, but based on my perception, I'm going to get away with it anyway, so why am I holding back for? And it's just this kind of general breakdown, in part because we believe it's there, we think it's there, even if it's not there or not. That's potentially encouraging people who otherwise wouldn't commit violent acts. And this could extend to the school children as well, right? Reprisal type mentality.
There is value in that trend of thought that, yes, because of some of the deficiencies within law enforcement, getting those persons behind facing the charges and being put before the court, there will be a percentage of individuals who believe that so brazen that I wouldn't get with it. But the situation that that is currently presenting itself right now is a cycle, because the violent student in the school today is a potential criminal of tomorrow.
Right.
So sad that we have changed the terminology, that we say the children of in my era, you heard the children of today are the leaders of tomorrow.
Yeah.
I mean, the irony behind that, and how it has been, how the conversation has changed, that the children of the school today, the violent children of the school, could be the gang leaders of tomorrow. Is that what we're really looking at for in society? But the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service holistically is trying their best to mitigate some of those situations by having community relations in the schools, having more community policing engaged in the schools. We have talk shops, we have a lot of activities that we need in school, but that's just one aspect of it.
Also, and I've mentioned this before, we might have even had this particular party discussion before, and one of my callers implied as much. That will help in the long run. In fact, that's important for the long run,
Yes.
but the current generation now, that's like, say, 16 and older, right? Definitely the ones that left school that already academically fell through the cracks, right? Because there's that whole joint aspect of it about the potential failures of the education system and the economy contributing to this. These things might not be so effective for older children, young people who are further down the path to try to intervene with these programs
And
right now.
When we talk about vulnerable groups within the context of school violence, the vulnerable groups are the one from 12 to 16. They are the ones that going into that system and almost out of the system, the secondary school system, I should say.
Yeah.
So between that period, you are now that is where the vulnerable group in schools are, and how do we the measures that we have to put in place is not. And I'm saying it's not that of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service alone. It's a holistic approach, because at the end of the day, other sectors have to step into the fray and treat with it from a holistic perspective. Now, the Ministry of Education does in fact have their guidelines that we have to abide by. So if anyone in the school would have committed an offense, they would be handed over to the police, and based on the type of offense, the police will lay the relative or the required charges to the individual. But at the end of the day, that child needs some level of rehabilitation to get back into society. Because at that young age, what are we doing? Are we waiting for the child to reach the prison system to talk about rehabilitation? That's a different type of rehabilitation. That is when you almost reach the pinnacle of your criminal career, and then you're done in the prison system. You know, we're talking about rehabilitation back into society. We have to catch these children between that vulnerable age to change their mindset, give them a different outlook in school, and the violence is not the answer. And that's a big question. And that's a big question. And
I think part of the problem is when people feel that they can't get justice. And I mean, this goes back to one of the opposition's policy decisions that they're seeking to campaign on, you know, stand your ground, this kind of thing. I've seen examples in the region, in Haiti, where, you know, vigilantism or things that lead to vigilantism could easily get out of hand. And one could wonder if to some extent we already have it there already, because I guess you could say you don't have to necessarily want to be in a gang, but at some point you might feel threatened enough that, hey, it's kind of like prison, right? You might go in not wanting to be involved, and then lines are drawn, and now you have to be involved. You might be a school child not wanting to go into a gang, but now you feel you have to join one in order to be protected, otherwise you might become a statistic because you don't have anybody to watch your back. You need to fall in line, you need to conform, you need to get allies, so you do what you have to do, and you know, you start to compromise your principles a little bit. And when you're 15, 14, 13, it's not as though you have a strong set of principles. Most children are now trying to just figure out who they are.
So true.
It's easily compromised.
It is. And that category where we consider, where I'm just classifying as considered to be the vulnerable groups that I'm looking at, in their own space, in their homes, in their communities, they are also vulnerable in that they have been influenced negatively. They have made violence attack on them. They may be subjected to a lot of different type of violence. And when they go into the school, they are now getting that opportunity to, because that's all they know. So they're exhibiting that type of behavior in the school environment. I have seen some videos, and I'm asking myself if these children really know what they are releasing, what they are doing, the type of violence and physical confrontation these students are they are dealt now, being dealt and involved in. I mean, there is not no normal type of violence.
Now, we're running out of time, so I just want to get to, I guess, what would be the most important thing to see this whole overall situation resolved. In my mind, the police, for the most part, really and truly, could only indirectly tackle this problem. Yes, community youth clubs and all of that indirectly attacks the problem, but even normal law enforcement duties, right, to some extent, you're catching children after they've committed some sort of crime, after they've done some sort of act of violence. That's not necessarily going to help stop it in the short term, right, directly. In the long run, that will also help indirectly, right? But really and truly, what we need is the communities. And as you said, you pointed out, it's not just gang violence now, it's probably maybe community violence, and the children are getting caught up in it. And what we need, look, East Laventil, they protested at the funeral of Ezekiel Parry. They called out for, you know, we need to save our children from this situation. But it's not just the police who try to put a wall of uniformed bodies on every street corner. The parents, the village, we have to get that back, because I just don't think, even if the police triple the resources and, you know, we would need like 100% detection rate and years to solve this issue, because the source, the root, is not really just deficiencies in the criminal justice system. There are a lot of other things and it might be compounded, but the root, to me, comes from the fact that, look, whatever factors that are affecting these kids directly, the police is indirect.
So true.
That is causing them to do this, and we need a direct positive influence, and that comes with community, family, parents, you know, mentors, etc.
Yeah, and the conversation should not be one of short term, as some situation presents itself in school, or when school opens, right, during the school period, violence rears its head, conversation, a lot of reactionary measures put in place, and as school closes, everything settles off, and then a school open again, and we start back again. It has to be ongoing, because it is not, school is just one avenue for that violence. So it's no longer, from what I look at it, as from school violence alone. It's violence. Children are engaged, or students in this vulnerable area group is engaged in violent behaviors. It could be at the school, it could be inside or outside of the school. It is because they are of violent nature.
Young people congregate in various areas.
Yeah, exactly.
And your enemies, you could meet them.
So we have to treat with it from different areas, from different sectors, have to be involved in this conversation. The Ministry of Education is one area of it in terms of the school, law enforcement as they come in the public spaces, but then there are other social programs and other state agencies need to come together holistically and discuss how we could treat with this situation going forward. It's going to be a lot of work.
I mean, I appreciate what you said, but I think we've reached the point where the state cannot compensate by spending resources for the lack of community, the organic guardianship of the community and the household and the extended family and the immediate family that our children, it is believed, used to have. I think to some extent a call to action needs to be placed now on guardians of children at all levels before we even reach the state. It's not me letting the state off the hook. It's just, that's just not going to work at some point. It could only go so far, and I think we're seeing an issue of, yeah, well, we could try and patchwork this all we want, but you can't replace parents with a social program. And
they need to take responsibility, or the community need to take responsibility of what is happening in their communities.
Well, folks, we have to take a break. When we come back, we open up the phone lines. Of course, you could ask all the questions you want on this and any other topic. Stay tuned. This is Talking About on WESN. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Hello there and welcome to AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. Before we even start this repatriation and reintegration process that we've already failed, or are we doomed to fail?
You've got to invest in the institutions that you've established to carry out those sorts of core functions.
We now get into the regional updates to give you an understanding of what's happening across our neighboring islands.
We have available a number of films that are worth showing.
So it was day one when the French Revolution started to develop the concept of universal human rights.
What happened this time is unprecedented. It's one of the largest terrorist attacks in history.
Let's welcome Carl to the program. Carl is over there next to himself. Hello, Carl.
Silky anteater or pygmy anteater, and we have two of the three species of anteaters right here.
Welcome back to Talking About, ladies and gentlemen. And a hard look, that's what I think a lot of our problems needs, a hard look in the mirror for us in TNT. We can't just expect the government to spend our way out of the issues, especially now when we're running out of money. We don't have as much as we had before. And just about 50% of the country at any given point in time will complain about the government and its inefficiencies and deficiencies. So why are we expecting them to save us? Now, is the time that we open up the phone lines. We want to hear from you. If you're calling and have your say, you could call in anything. I will try and answer as best as I can. The ASP is here. He will try and answer as best as he can. The main thing that we ask is that you please stay respectful in how you ask your questions. I would like to point out, despite the disagreements we had last week Friday, I very much appreciated that everybody, for the most part, was respectful, and I didn't have to cut any calls because the language started to get out of hand. So please remember that. I know I expect people, if you call in on topics like what was spoken about today, you will have a heightened emotional state, because at the end of the day, things like murder and our citizens being killed or put at risk, or our security, these are important issues to all of us. But it's not as though the ASP and I are the root cause of all the problems, so you could fight it out with us to alleviate your stress. All right, we're here for a mature discussion, I guess you could say. Now, while we do this all the time, while we wait for calls, although I think last week we had a lot of time to speak. You know, I don't necessarily want to put you on too many spots here, but let me ask with regards to the border security situation, just to be clear, because I know that the maritime unit was supposed to have been reformed. To what extent does the police really have? Because I've been hard on the Coast Guard, so I just want to clarify things before I continue going on this one. Well, to what extent is the police involved with border security?
We have the coastal and marine unit. All right, it's not as elaborate, or it's not an entire sector like that of the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard. It's a smaller unit. It doesn't have that level of capabilities, the amount of manpower and resources.
It can't patrol the entire coast?
No, it is not for the entire coast, and more for the internal areas, more close to the shorelines of Trinidad and Tobago, in and around our shorelines. So we do have limitations in what we can do and what we cannot do.
But like, you're not going to have a unit deployed to Mayaro, in 15 minutes.
No,
you're not going to have a
it's not realistic. Our vessels would not be able to maneuver or reach those areas in a very short space of time.
Right, and you don't have 100 boats.
No, and they're not distributed across the ground.
We have a caller from Tobago. Good morning, caller. You're on here.
Hi, good morning, Sean.
Morning.
And good morning to your guests.
Morning, sir.
I can appreciate the conversation you guys are having concerning the community's responsibility in the socialization of its children. Its children. And I say its children because within the large context of the Trinidad and Tobago community, we have communities within that community. We have the Indian community, we have Chinese community, we have Syrian community, we have various communities within that large context of Trinidad and Tobago. What we have to identify is which community are we really having an issue with here in Trinidad and Tobago as far as our children are concerned. When we hear about children stabbing each other in school, a bunch of children attacking a school bus to beat up one child, how many of those children are Indian? How many are Chinese? How many are Syrian? Let's get down to the nitty-gritty and identify the community that we're really having an issue with. Because now that you're talking about, you're really raising the conversation now to community responsibility for its children. It is the African community that has been deculturized, that has lost its way of socializing its children without whipping them. Because coming off the plantation, that is the way we socialize our children. We picked it up on the plantation because the slave master whipped us and got our attention that way, and we started beating our children in order to get their attention immediately, to modify behavior immediately to save their life. When you go out there, this is how I need you to behave, because if you don't behave this way, you're not coming back home. You're going to end up hanging from a tree like your father. And so I need you to behave. So I'm going to whip you to get your attention immediately. Now that we can no longer whip our children, we don't know how to socialize them because we have not been practicing our culture all along. Other communities have been. They still have their rites of passage for their children. They know how to move their children from you're a child, now you're going into young adulthood, and this is how I need for you to handle yourself in society and so forth and so forth. The African community does not have that. And so what we're really talking about is something that has been in place as part of our culture that we lost on the plantation, which is called rites of passage. And that is what it's going to take to save our children. When you, Mr. from the police department there, talk about you can't wait until the children get to a certain age and then you want to talk about reining them back in. It's become too late then. You have to get them at that juncture where they're moving now from a child and they're going into that adolescent stage. The boys are starting to smell themselves. The testosterone is starting to surge around 11, 12, and so forth and so forth. That is when you have to get them and instruct them as to who they are and their roles and responsibilities to their community. We don't have that. And this is why we're having this problem. So now you're coming to that point where you're saying, this is what we need to do. We need to get the children at a certain age, and the community needs to get involved, and so forth and so forth and so forth. What you're really talking about is rites of passage for the African community, because that is where the main problem is. Let's start talking about the problem as to where it actually is. You don't have to be, politically correct and try to talk around the problem. You're not having this problem in the Chinese community. You're not having it in the Syrian community. You're not having it in the Indian community. Not to say that their children are perfect, that they're not doing things, but you're not having this kind of problem. You're having this kind of problem in the African community. What is it about the African community that is different from all the other communities? We've lost our culture. We've lost the way we socialize our children. I'm going to end right there, brother. Thank you very much.
Thank you, caller. That's a lot to unpack. And actually, to some extent, I may not have agreed with you maybe a couple of weeks ago, a couple of months ago, but actually I've recently seen some things where even though there might be some details I disagree with you, I think for the most part I actually agree with most of what you just said, because what we see as, for lack of a better word, a Western black culture, that is to say African American, Afro-Trinbagonian, black people in the United Kingdom and Europe, what we see as black culture, right, in the West, to some extent really is born from European culture, right? It might be modified, some aspects might have changed to the tastes of the individuals as societies evolved, etc., etc. But to some extent, there's a lot of truth in that. And I think your arguments, at the end of the day, look, Chinese people have a thing about education, and it's from a deep root of the imperial exams in the ancient Chinese empires, where you do well in the imperial exams, you can become an official in the government, you could become somebody, right? It's a deep-seated thing, and to some extent, I think you're right. I think with Afro-Trinbagonians and other Western nations, they don't have that. So when society evolves and culture shifts, they don't have these deep-seated traditions and philosophies to kind of backstop negative aspects of the shift, to kind of prevent things going too far down the wrong road. I think there's some truth. I don't know how true it is, right? But I agree with you, and there's more I could probably say on it, but we have a caller from San Juan. Thank you. Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Morning, Sean.
Morning, morning.
Pleasant day, and morning to the officer.
Morning, sir.
Officer, good work with those drugs. Good work with the stash of ammunition. I believe you all should have some more soon, because a lot of these importers and them have their gang leaders who they are profiting off, hiding their business away from their business. I believe that the next thing, you see the Cedrus thing with these fishermen, the amount of millions of US dollars was stolen from those people that coming in to our shores here from Venezuela illegally. They were robbed of their money. They were who just after they pay up and come off these boats into our land here. So these fellas have to watch it. Anytime they cross the line, Trinidad Big Sister people out there are going to take them. They ain't finished yet. There's a lot of Venezuelans that coming across here that were robbed of their money and shipped back 2, 3, 4 days after. Those Amerindian people there, they don't forget these things. And anytime they cross that line, sir, they're going to get taken. Next problem. You see the school violence? Time for us to bring the judiciary into that. Parents must be able to pay a fine when they children damage an next child in our schools. That should have been done since Mr. Garcia times. I thought Ms. Gaspidoli, as she come in, she'd have asked the Attorney General to draft a bill. But I don't know.
Very interesting, isn't it?
She's sticking. She better unstick and let the second minister handle the crime here, and you will see how different. That's a Amerindian breed, man. Serious people. Gentlemen, you all have a good day, a safe week, all the best.
Thank you, caller. We have a next caller coming in from Maraval. Good morning, caller. You on the air? Caller, good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
Hi, do me a favor. Good morning. I haven't called in for a while.
Yeah.
Officer, I'd like to find out something. I have asked policemen, I have asked even members of parliament who I know, and none of them could answer me. I want to know, I'm going, say, by the infirmary, the old poorhouse. The sign says, no parking Monday, Wednesday, Friday on this side. On the next side, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, whatever. A person has a store with one garage door, but he digs out 80 foot of pavement and puts up a sign and a security saying no parking here. Next to it, going down, same thing. They dig out the whole pavement, 80 feet, and when I come to park, the man is telling me you can't park here. I said, the sign says parking here Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 9 to 3. He said, this is private. I am going up now by the offices of the goodly gentleman right here. And right there on Gattaca Street corner, on the opposite side, you have Liu Rain and everybody. They go the whole pavement and say no parking, but the sign say park here. Who is right and who is wrong? No policeman seems to know. Thank you.
That's a good one.
That's a very interesting question.
But I think what he's saying is, one side, it might be, everybody has driveway for the whole plot, apparently.
But, and that is the thing that you're looking at. Is that persons do not have, so the parking signs that he is speaking about is parking on the public streets. Once the parking signs are there indicating that they can park on the public street, and the signage indicate on the what day you could park on what left side, right side, left side, I should say the northern side or southern side, you're authorized to park. The problem that I believe that he would have been indicating is that persons would have destroyed or removed the pavement, and from the pavement to their parking, the entry to their business.
Right.
That piece of pavement in front of them is access to their personal property.
I'm also assuming that they've basically made their own 3 or 4 car parking lot for their business, and they don't want it to be blocked. But the problem is, I'm going to that business and I can't park on that side of the road today because...
So in reality, the parking sign, or in the context of the law, the signage gives you authority to park on the street, on the road. So you can park on the road.
But what if a police officer comes and doesn't see it that way?
Well, the signage states that I can park. Now, if an officer decides to tell an individual, or the proprietor of that business calls the police and say, somebody is blocking my entrance, there's a big difference with blocking the entrance if the person is parking on the streets where signage is there. See, these are some of the things that have been done and not understanding the implication to the general public.
Yeah.
Because certain agencies does in fact make the railroad put up the signage, transport division, right, in collaboration with the city of Port of Spain, they will put up signage in certain areas, especially in the West, where he's talking about in the West. The conversation here is, because of the fact that there's a sign, it is legal. It's authorized parking. But if the owner of that property cannot block the road, the street, cannot say that this piece of the public space, the piece of this public space is my private space. That pavement belongs to the state.
I would just like to point out, I don't know if it is town and country planning, but I'm starting to think, well, you know, how was potentially work like this allowed where you could make a claim on the street, basically?
And when you, there's another caller.
Yeah, there's another caller. From Chagonas, good morning, caller, you on there?
Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning,
morning,
Professor.
Sir. I want to follow up on the last caller about people interfering with where people would park. In Chagonas here, we have people getting police sign and using it, and the police do nothing about it. Which brings me to one of the points you talk about with dealing with crime and improper behavior. I have repeatedly said that the way you do it that is to enforce your laws. And nobody in Trinidad and Tobago in the governmental agency enforce their laws. Your guests have previously pointed out that people could use discretion. You don't use discretion in enforcing the law. You might use discretion in whether you arrest the person, but you address the problem. If the person is doing something wrong, you have to bring it to your attention, and if he continues, you got to charge him. Unless you sit down and have respect for the law. We had a case in some school which had an official function, and you had dress code, and people ignored the dress code, and people talk about their right to use the cultural inheritance and whatnot, which have nothing to do with it. Law is at the point in time. What was 1,000 years and more in some other continent is irrelevant. This is Trinidad and Tobago. We have our laws here, and we have to enforce our laws. Thank you, gentlemen, unless you have a comment or question.
No, I agree with you. It goes back to what the previous caller said. How is this allowed? And something is not being enforced. So in that regard, you're right. But we do have another caller from Cascade. Thank you, Professor. Caller from Cascade, good morning. Caller, you on there? Caller, good morning. Good morning, caller. If we don't, caller, we are out of time. So if we can't connect to you, we might have to just end things there. It's 9:27. All right, okay. Unfortunately, we were waiting on the professor to finish from Chagonas, but unfortunately, we lost caller from Cascade. Caller from Cascade, you could call in tomorrow to say your piece, right? Guys. All right, we'll take San Fernando. This is the last call because we have to wrap up. San Fernando, you're on here. Good morning, caller, you're on here.
Morning, Sean. Morning, ASPRE.
Morning, morning.
That's going back to the issue you were talking about, school violence and where it has reached in Trinidad and Tobago. One of the key things, and early o'clock the police service recognized that is why they started this what they call it, these police youth clubs. You have to harness at that age. There's a lot of energy, and you have to harness that energy. What I have seen is that there's a lack of there are much less community organizations involving the youth. They are much less than. But the thing is, it has to come from a place of the community. People in the community have to decide that we are going to get involved. We are going to start a group, a football side, something. I was a benefit of that, and I was one of those who decided to give back. But there are not enough people in the community that are willing to give their time, because it's a sacrifice. It's a sacrifice. You have to make a personal sacrifice to give of your time and your talent to try and make your district or your area or your street a better place. You are, and there's.
I think we lost the girl from San Fernando. All right. Okay, so we don't have to. All right. So, caller from Cascade, you could call in tomorrow if you want to continue the conversation. ASP, we're more or less out of time. I don't know if you have any final words to say.
Well, at the end of the day, we just want to reinforce that it takes a lot to treat with the level of violence in schools. And I'm not saying that it's school violence anymore. Youth violence that I'm going to classify it as now, because it's not happening in school, it's happening out of the school, it's happening within the communities. And yes, the communities need to step up, because at the end of the day, the police only have so much they can do with respect to the level of violence, right? But it has to be a holistic approach. There has to be much more conversation with respective, and communities, parents, and guardians need to be held accountable, right? How that level of accountability goes, that's another conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think the unfortunate thing is that's informal, right? But yes, it's not that we're saying the government, you know, it's not they're doing everything right and it's perfect, and the education ministry and the police service and all the social programs is perfect. It's not that. It's just that the problem is it never came wholly because of those institutions, and it cannot be solved wholly by those institutions. And I think Mr. San Fernando's point is very much, it hits the nail on the head. It requires sacrifice at a time when we have less and less of it, less and less time to sacrifice because of the demands of the modern living, etc., etc. It's unfortunate. It's your reality. Ironically, we didn't have a lot of time in the past throughout history because we had to work so hard. Humanity had to work so hard just to survive. And now when we don't, somehow the time has evaporated for Lord only knows what. But that is potentially the way forward. And we just need to be willing to grasp it, to implement it. And it's not just the government. Listen, you know I have criticisms for the government, but it can't just be them alone. No matter how well they do, they cannot solve all our problems from us. Despite all the pessimisms, folks, we still believe in TNT. Make today a good day, as my course always says. And just to remind you, this is Talk About a WESN show. My Goswell Ashraf Ali, at least for myself, my allegiance is to the Republic. We'll see you tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.
WESN. FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website, www.fanzone.com.